Hensel and Gretel, a story by the Brothers Grimm. When you hear this sound, it's time to turn the page. Once upon a time, in a little house near the forest, there lived a brother and sister, Hensel and Gretel. They lived with their father, a woodcutter, who loved them very much, and their stepmother, who was very cruel. In fact, the stepmother wanted to get rid of the children because there was not enough food to eat. She told her husband that they should take the children into the forest and leave them to get along as best they could. This made him very unhappy, but finally he agreed. Hensel and Gretel had heard them talking, and Hensel had a plan of his own. In the morning, the children were given some bread and were led into the forest. Along the way, Hensel dropped pebbles from his pocket. After a while, the father helped his children build a fire and told them to rest. As soon as they fell asleep, the parents went home. When they awakened, Hensel and Gretel found their way home, following the pebbles. Their stepmother was terribly angry. The next morning, the children were given bread and taken into the forest again. This time, Hensel had no pebbles, but dropped bits of bread instead. Later, when they tried to find the trail of bread, it was gone. Birds had eaten every crumb. That night, the children were really frightened and lonely and tired. They fell asleep in a hollow tree. When they awakened, they decided to walk through the forest to look for help. They saw friendly animals scurrying about and heard birds singing in the trees. At last they came to a clearing in the forest and saw a beautiful little house. It was made of cake with an icing roof and lollipops sticking out of the chimney. The children were so hungry that they ran up to the house and broke off pieces of it. They heard a voice call out, "Nibble, nibble like a mouse. Who is nibbling at my house?" Out stepped an old woman, who was really a witch. But she spoke kindly and invited the children inside. After supper, when they had fallen asleep, the wicked witch crept into their bedroom and carried Hensel outside and locked him in a cage. She planned to keep him there until he grew fat enough to eat. As for Gretel, the witch made her do all the housework. Every day, Hensel and Gretel tried to think of a way to get rid of the witch. Every day, the witch went out to the cage to feel Hensel's finger, to see how fat he was getting. But Hensel knew the witch could not see very well, so he held out a dry chicken bone to make her think he was still thin and bony. After a while, the witch became impatient and decided she would eat him anyway, fat or thin. That afternoon, the wicked witch told Gretel to fill the kettle with water. Next, she sent her to gather sticks to build a fire so that the water would boil. Then the witch told Gretel to call her when the water was boiling and ready. Gretel called when she heard the water boiling, but told the witch she could not see into the pot. The witch was so anxious to eat Hensel that she ran over to the big pot with the boiling water. The witch leaned over, and when she did, the little girl gave her a tremendous push. Splash! The old woman landed in the boiling water in her own kettle. And that was the end of the witch forever. Gretel quickly ran outside and unlocked Hensel's cage. They danced with joy to be rid of the wicked witch. Then they searched the house and found a trunk filled with shiny gold coins and beautiful jewels of all kinds. They gathered all they could carry and decided to try to find their way back home to their father. Through the trees, the children saw a large white swan gliding on the water. She spread her wings, and they climbed on her back. She carried them downstream to their house on the edge of the forest. Their father was so glad to see his son and daughter again that he kissed them over and over again, and they all cried with happiness. Then he explained that he had sent their cruel stepmother away forever. Hansel and Gretel gave their father all the riches they had brought, and they lived together happily ever after.